Holistay. The storm hit just as the GPS announced their arrival. Sheets of rain lashed against the windshield as Ava Jensen squinted through the wipers. Her boyfriend, Mark, leaned forward from the passenger seat, trying to read the wooden sign illuminated by the car's high beams. Holistay, a retreat for the soul. The letters were worn, some cracked and faded. The sign swung slightly in the wind, creaking like an old door hinge. "This better not be another spiritual scam," Mark muttered. Ava shot him a look. "You agreed to unplug for the weekend, remember?" "I agreed to unplug, not be murdered in the woods." Despite his sarcasm, Ava drove them forward. Their friends, Lena and Caleb, had booked this retreat months ago. No phones, no internet, just a secluded Airbnb-style getaway in a converted mansion nestled deep in the Oregon wilderness. A holistic escape, the listing had said. Nature, wellness, and peace. But something about the place felt wrong. As they pulled into the gravel lot, the mansion came into view. 3 stories tall, with sharp eaves and wraparound porches, it looked more like a Victorian asylum than a luxury stay. The exterior was bone white, but the paint had faded in long streaks, like tears down a ghost's face. "Looks better in the photos," Ava said with a forced laugh. Mark checked his phone. No signal. Ava noticed it too. "Well, I guess we're officially unplugged." Inside the mansion, the door opened before they knocked. A pale woman in her 40s stood in the threshold, smiling politely. Her hair was tightly pulled into a bun, and her clothes looked handmade, white linen and loose-fitting. "Welcome," she said softly. "I'm Clara. You must be Ava and Mark." "You knew we were coming?" Ava asked. Clara stepped aside. "Of course, Holistay sees all arrivals." They exchanged a look and stepped inside. The foyer was strangely warm. Incense floated in the air. Lavender, maybe. Candles flick. Wooden floors creaked underfoot as Clara led them toward the grand staircase. "Your friends are already here," she said. "Dinner will be at 7. Everything else will find you in time." Mark whispered to Ava, "What does that mean?" "No idea," Ava muttered back. Upstairs, their room looked surprisingly modern. King bed, minimal furniture, a view of the misty forest. But no TV, no outlets. Even the clock was analog. "Weird," Mark said, flopping on the bed. "It's like being in a cult, but with nice sheets." Ava opened the wardrobe. No hangers, just long, white robes. The first night. At dinner, Lena and Caleb looked different. Too calm. Their eyes had a distant glaze, as though they had been up for hours meditating. "It's amazing here," Lena whispered. "You'll see." Caleb nodded. "Clara says the house reveals things, truths, wounds you don't even know you carry." Mark rolled his eyes. "You sound like you joined a yoga death cult." Clara stood at the end of the table, her hands raised in silent blessing. "You have arrived," she said. "Now, let Holistay begin." The lights dimmed, and from somewhere beneath the house, a deep hum began to rise. Not from machines, it sounded alive. The hum grew louder that night. It wasn't electrical, no mechanical buzz or vibrating pipes. It sounded like a chant, deep and guttural, echoing from somewhere far beneath the house. It vibrated the wooden floors beneath their feet and seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeats. Mark got up from the dinner table first. "Nope, not staying for whatever that is." Clara simply smiled, as if she'd heard this kind of reaction 100 times. It's nothing to be afraid of. The house is waking up. Holistay doesn't just heal, it reveals. Ava glanced toward Lena and Caleb. Neither seemed disturbed. In fact, they were still eating as though nothing had happened. "Where's it coming from?" Ava asked. Clara didn't answer directly. Some places are built on strong ground. Others are built on secrets. Holistay is both. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening. The hum had faded, but something else lingered in the air, like static you couldn't see, but could feel crawling across your skin. Mark was next to her, but even in sleep he looked tense, his brow furrowed. She got up quietly and walked into the hallway. The house was pitch dark, except for a single lantern hanging at the far end of the corridor. Drawn to it, she moved forward. That's when she saw the door. It hadn't been there earlier. At least, not that she remembered. A narrow, arched wooden door with a spiral symbol carved into the center. It was slightly ajar, and a dim, flickering light seeped through the crack. Ava hesitated, then opened it. A staircase spiraled downward into darkness. The room below. The air grew colder with each step. When she reached the bottom, she found a circular chamber. Stone walls, no windows. The room was lit by candles placed in patterns along the floor. Symbols, none of which she recognized, had been drawn in chalk or ash. And in the center of the room was a pool of black water, still as glass. It didn't reflect her image. Instead, it showed something else. A hallway, her own hallway upstairs, and in it, someone walking toward her room. She gasped and stumbled back. That's when she saw Clara. The host stood in the far corner, her eyes closed, murmuring in a language Ava had never heard. The chanting from dinner, it had started again. Clara opened her eyes slowly. "It's okay, Ava. You're beginning to see. That's what Holistay wants, to reveal." Ava turned and bolted up the stairs. The next day, Mark didn't believe her at first. Neither did Lena or Caleb. They claimed she was dreaming, that the house sometimes plays tricks. But Ava knew what she saw, and then the door vanished. She tried to retrace her steps, find the same lantern, the same hallway, but it was gone. The space where the strange door had been was now a blank wall. "I think they're doing something to us," she whispered to Mark that afternoon. "Something isn't right here. I think the house is alive." Mark scoffed. "You sound like Caleb now." Ava shook her head. "No, it's not just a retreat. It's a ritual. We're part of something. Maybe the thing." That night, they tried to leave. Escape attempt. They packed bags and slipped out the back door, hoping to avoid Clara and the other guests. But the forest didn't make sense. No matter which direction they walked, they ended up right back in front of the mansion. The trees were the same. The broken branch Ava had marked, same spot. Again and again. Hours passed. Eventually, the front door opened. Clara stood there, still smiling. "You're not the first to try," she said. "The house doesn't let go until it's done with you." Back inside, they were guided, gently but firmly, back to the... "No more exploring," Clara said sweetly. "It's best you let Holistay do its work. Resistance only prolongs the pain." That night, Ava didn't sleep. Neither did Mark. The walls seemed to breathe around them. At 3:13 a.m., the door opened slowly on its own. A man in white stood there, but he had no face. Only a smooth expanse of skin stretched across his head, pulsing like a sack of worms beneath the surface. He pointed at Ava, and then whispered, "You were chosen first." Ava's scream died in her throat. The faceless man stood still, arm outstretched, finger pointed directly at her heart. His head tilted slightly, like a dog sniffing for something it couldn't see. The skin where his face should be rippled, bulged, then went still. Mark sat up in bed. What the hell? But the man vanished. Not ran, not faded, vanished. Like he'd blinked out of reality. Ava backed up against the headboard, trembling. "You saw him. You saw him, right?" Mark looked pale. That wasn't Clara or Lena. What was that thing? A faint whisper echoed down the hall. "You were chosen first." The next morning, Clara acted like nothing had happened. Breakfast was served with a smile. Fresh fruit, warm bread, tea. Lena and Caleb were already seated, their robes cleaner than ever, their faces blank and peaceful. Mark leaned in close. "We saw something last night." Clara just smiled. "You're beginning to open." "To what?" Ava asked. She leaned forward. "To yourself. Holistay isn't a retreat from life. It's a retreat from illusion." Ava's patience snapped. "There was a faceless man in our room!" Clara placed a hand gently on Ava's arm. "He's not a man. He's a reflection. You saw what's hidden behind your mind's mask." The group session. That afternoon, Clara led them to the gathering room. The large circular chamber was filled with floor cushions arranged in a ritualistic spiral. The windows were covered, blocking all outside light. Candles burned in wall sconces, and symbols were drawn across the hardwood in chalk. Spirals, eyes, mirrored triangles. "We'll begin with unveiling," Clara announced. Each guest was instructed to wear the white robe and sit cross-legged. Lena and Caleb complied easily. Ava resisted. Mark hesitated, but joined. Eventually, Ava sat down too, reluctantly. Clara knelt in the center of the room. "Close your eyes," she whispered. "Let go. Let Holistay show you who you are beneath who you pretend to be." Ava tried to keep her mind blank, but images began to form. A hospital room. Screaming. Blood on white tile. A face she hadn't thought about in years. Her sister's. Dead. The air grew cold. Ava opened her eyes and gasped. She was alone. The cushions were still there, the candles still flickering, but everyone else had disappeared. The mirror corridor. She stood up. The gathering room was gone. Instead, Ava found herself in a narrow hallway of endless mirrors. On both sides, her reflection walked with her, but something was wrong. The mirrors didn't show what she did. One reflection turned its head before she did. Another smiled when she was frowning. She stopped in front of one mirror and stared at herself. Her reflection stepped forward and climbed through the glass. It stood before her now, a version of herself, same face, same clothes, but darker, angry, bleeding from the hands. "You buried me," the reflection said. "You left me with her." I didn't know," Ava stammered. "I was scared." "You let her die." The lights flickered, and the reflection lunged. Back to reality? Ava awoke on the floor of the gathering room. Her throat was sore from screaming. Mark was shaking her. "Ava! Ava, wake up! You were convulsing!" Lena looked on calmly. The first unveiling is always violent. Caleb nodded. The house reveals. It heals after it hurts. Ava sat up, clutching her head. I saw her. I saw myself. But not me. Clara placed a hand on Ava's shoulder. You've taken the first step. Now Holistay can begin the offering. The what? But Clara only smiled. It always begins with the chosen guest. That night, Mark packed bags again. We're leaving. I don't care how far we have to walk. Ava was shaking. It's like it knows. It knew about my sister. No one knows about her. We'll get out. We'll find a ranger station, a road, anything. They opened the door, and the hallway was gone. In its place was a long tunnel, made of stone, lit by blue fire along the walls. The air smelled of earth and rot. Voices echoed up from the darkness, chanting. Clara's voice, Lena, Caleb, and Ava's own voice, calling her name. Ava, Ava, come see. Mark turned to her, his face pale. This place isn't a retreat. It's a trap. No, Ava whispered. It's a ritual. They stepped into the tunnel. Tools. The tunnel felt endless. The deeper Ava and Mark walked, the more the air changed, thicker, moister, and strangely warm, like the breath of some vast creature exhaling from the earth itself. The blue flames lining the walls flickered without wind, casting eerie shadows that moved on their own. Ava kept glancing behind them. We've been walking for 20 minutes. There's no way this is under the house. It's not, Mark said grimly. We're somewhere else. The tunnel eventually opened into a massive underground hall, impossibly wide. Stone columns lined both sides, and the ceiling arched hundreds of feet above them. The walls were covered in symbols etched into the rock, glowing faintly with a sickly red hue. Ava whispered, "It's like a cathedral." Mark's eyes scanned the room. Or a tomb. The murals were giant murals, ancient and disturbing. One showed a group of robed figures offering something to a shadowy being with horns and no face. Another depicted a house, identical to Holistay, sitting atop a spiraling pit of writhing souls. The final mural showed guests, like them, entering the house, being broken down, devoured spiritually, and then reborn with glowing eyes, like Clara. Ava stepped back. It's a cycle. They bring people here, over and over. We're part of a ritual that feeds something. Mark pointed at the last section of the mural. One of the guests had Ava's face, her exact face, painted centuries ago. The choir of echoes. Suddenly, chanting started. Low at first, distant and muffled, but growing louder with every second. Mark grabbed Ava's arm. We need to move, now. They ducked behind one of the massive columns, just as robed figures entered the hall from a corridor behind them. Clara led the procession, her linen robes stained with red symbols that pulsed faintly under the firelight. Lena and Caleb followed. Their faces were vacant. Lena's mouth moved in rhythm with the chant, but no sound came out. Clara raised her hands. The chosen guest has entered the house below, she announced. She walks with fear in her heart and fire in her soul. All heads turned in Ava's direction. She hadn't made a sound. They knew she was there. Captured. Before they could run, something lunged from behind them. Another robed figure, mouth sewn shut, eyes glowing orange. It grabbed Mark and slammed him against the stone. Ava screamed as more figures emerged. They didn't speak. They simply restrained her, lifting her off the ground and carrying her toward the center of the chamber. Clara stepped forward and gently pressed a cold hand against Ava's forehead. "You carry pain," she whispered. "A great, deep wound. That's why Holistay chose you." "You're insane," Ava spat. Clara smiled. "You'll see. Before the end, you'll thank us. You'll thank it." They dragged Ava into a smaller chamber at the edge of the cathedral-like hall. The offering room. A circular pit in the middle, black and bottomless, emitted a faint growl, as if the earth itself was hungry. Bones lined the edges of the pit, each marked with spiral carvings. Hanging above the pit were hundreds of wind chimes made of teeth swaying gently with no breeze. In the center, they placed her. Clara began to chant again. Ava felt her body stiffen. She couldn't move. Her arms and legs wouldn't respond. "You buried your sister's death," Clara whispered. "But it remembers, and it will make you whole." From the shadows, the faceless man emerged once again. He moved toward her slowly, raising one hand. Ava screamed. Elsewhere, Mark's escape. While the ceremony began, Mark woke up in a small cell, carved from rock, his head pounding. A tiny hole in the stone allowed a view into the offering room. He could see Ava, frozen in place, screaming without sound. He punched the wall in frustration. Suddenly, a voice beside him. "They did the same to me." Mark turned. Another man, ragged, half-starved, but lucid, sat in the corner. "My name's Arthur. I was a guest here 10 years ago. I escaped the first offering. Been hiding since." "Why haven't you left?" Mark asked. Arthur laughed bitterly. "You don't leave Holistay. You either become part of the house or part of the meal." A forbidden passage. Arthur showed Mark a narrow passage behind the cell, carved long ago by former victims. A forgotten escape route. "It leads beneath the offering room," Arthur said. "You'll see the heart, the thing they feed. If you kill it, the house dies. Everything ends." Mark didn't hesitate. He crawled through the tunnel, Arthur following behind, the sound of chanting growing louder as they neared the heart of Holistay. The heart. They emerged into a massive, pulsating cavern beneath the pit. In the center was a monstrous organ, like a heart but the size of a truck, suspended in midair by thick, fleshy tendrils. It beat slowly, each pulse shaking the ground. From it extended black veins that twisted up into the rock, feeding the mansion, the land, the guests. "Is that alive?" Mark whispered. Arthur nodded. "It's not from here. It fell long ago. They built Holistay on top of it. The rituals feed it. Every offering strengthens it." Mark stared in horror. It wasn't just a house. It was a parasite, and it was awakening. Ava floated, or at least it felt like floating. But beneath her, the dark pit whispered her name again and again, not in one voice, but in many. Hers, her sister's, Mark's, a chorus of every fear she'd ever buried. And in the center of that infinite void, something pulsed. Not just the heart of the house, it was her own, stretched and reshaped. Suddenly, a voice pierced the blackness. "Ava, wake up." The vision room. Ava's eyes opened, but not to the stone walls or the offering pit. She was in a white room, featureless, soundless, empty, until the walls began bleeding. She staggered back. The blood formed images, moving memories etched in crimson. Her sister Emily, screaming in a hospital bed. Ava, backing away, afraid to touch her. A flatline. A door closed that should have been left open. She dropped to her knees. No, stop. But the blood spread faster now, coating everything in pulsing red, spelling out words. You ran. You let her die. A face emerged in the red. A mirror image of Ava. Only this version had hollow eyes, a black mouth, and tears made of ash. Become one of us, it whispered. Become part of Holistay. Beneath the offering room, Mark stood at the edge of the heart. The tendrils writhed slowly, feeding on unseen energy from above. The same energy being pulled from Ava. Arthur held a long iron spike he'd scavenged. It's not just a creature, he said. It's a god to them. A parasite that thrives on human regret. Mark stared at the fleshy mass. And if we destroy it? Arthur looked grim. Holistay falls, but the guests trapped in its echo might fall with it. Mark paused. So Ava, if we can break her from its grip before we strike, she might survive. But not if we're too late. Suddenly, the ground trembled. A sound echoed from the pit above. A scream. Ava's scream. Ava's awakening. Back in the white room of blood and memories, Ava stood trembling. The faceless version of her walked forward, hands raised. I was what you couldn't face, it hissed. I held all the guilt so you could forget. But now you remember. The white room shattered like glass. She fell again, into the offering pit, into the truth. When she landed, she wasn't broken. She was home, standing in a copy of Holistay, but everything was decayed, moldy, flickering, the true house. Clara stood at the end of the hallway, her eyes burning yellow now. You're crossing over, Clara said. The others just serve. But you are the next host. Ava backed away. No, I'm not becoming part of this. You already are. The escape plan, Mark climbed up through the tunnel, Arthur behind him. They reached a small grate under the offering pit. He could see Ava, standing still, eyes glazed, as Clara moved around her, chanting, drawing blood across her forehead. Arthur handed Mark the spike. Destroy the vein in the center, once. But be warned, if Ava's mind is still inside the house, it may take her with it. Mark took the spike and nodded, and climbed into the offering room. Confrontation. Clara saw him too late. Mark rushed forward, grabbing Ava's hand. She blinked. Ava, wake up! This place, it's feeding on you! She stared into his eyes, and for the first time, she remembered everything. I saw her, Ava whispered. I saw Emily. I know. She said, if I stay, I can bring her back. Clara laughed behind them. You can. Holistay is a bridge. Memory made flesh. Pain made purpose. Mark held the spike in his other hand. But it's not real, Ava. None of this is her. It's your guilt wearing her face. Tears rolled down Ava's cheeks. I miss her so much. He stepped closer. So do I. But you're still here. You're still alive. And you still have a choice. She looked at Clara, who now held a curved blade of bone. Stay, Clara said, and become everything. Ava turned, took the spike from Mark, and threw it into the floor. The collapse, the offering room, shook violently. From beneath the stone, the parasite heart howled, its veins snapping and recoiling like snakes set on fire. The walls cracked. Blood seeped through every surface. The chimes of teeth shattered. Ava collapsed in Mark's arms as the room began to implode. Clara screamed, then cracked open like porcelain, light spilling from her eyes before she was vaporized. Arthur reached through the tunnel. "Come on, now!" Mark pulled Ava through the collapsing passage. Behind them, Holistay screamed. Above ground, the last sunrise. They emerged at the edge of the woods. The forest was quiet. The trees no longer twisted. The air no longer buzzed. And when they turned around, Holistay was gone. Only a smoking crater remained, pulsing once before falling still forever. Ava collapsed into the grass, tears mixing with dirt. Mark held her. "Yo, I'm not sure," she replied. "I think I just closed the door." They watched the sun rise, silent and beautiful. Epilogue: a new guest. A sleek black car pulled up to a different retreat on the other side of the country. A sign read, "Welcome to Mind Harvest Wellness Spa." A smiling woman greeted a new guest. "We're so glad you're here," she said. "Our retreat helps you let go and remember who you really are." The guest smiled. Behind the receptionist's eyes, a faint yellow glow shimmered. 3 weeks later, Ava sat in the quiet of her new apartment in the city, a small, modest place above a flower shop. Mark had gone out for groceries, leaving her alone with the growing silence. But lately, the silence wasn't silent anymore. It began as faint whispers, nothing intelligible, just a hush at the edges of her hearing. But last night, she'd heard it clearly, just before sleep. "Come back." At first, she blamed trauma, PTSD, dreams. Mark insisted what they'd survived would leave mental scars. She believed him. Until her lights started flickering at 3:33 a.m. every night. Until she noticed dirt, soil, on her clean floors when she hadn't left the house. Until just yesterday, her reflection smiled when she didn't. Mark returned with groceries and forced a smile when she told him. He kissed her forehead. "It's over. Holistay's gone. We saw it collapse." But that night, when Ava couldn't sleep, she wandered into the kitchen and saw Mark standing motionless in the dark, staring at nothing. She called his name. No response. She stepped closer. His eyes were wide, unblinking. From his nostrils, a thin line of black fluid dripped onto the floor. She grabbed his shoulders. "Mark!" He blinked and gasped. What just happened? You were gone." He looked terrified. I was in the woods again. I smelled the smoke, heard the chimes." They looked at each other. Ava whispered, "We didn't kill it, did we?" Desperate for answers, Ava found a survivors forum buried on a dark corner of the internet, a place for victims of paranormal events to talk anonymously. There were others. A woman who visited a lodge in Vermont and woke up 5 years later in a different country. A man who swore the Airbnb he rented in Poland ate his wife. And finally, a username, @TrappedForever1979. They messaged he, "You were at Holistay. I saw the firestorm, but you only burned one vein. It always regrows elsewhere. The cycle always continues." Ava typed back, "How do I stop it completely?" The reply came instantly, "You don't. You go back in." That night, Ava dreamt of a spiral burned into the back of her hand. When she woke, it was there, a deep red brand, throbbing like it had just been seared into her skin. Mark panicked. "It's marking you. That thing, it's pulling you back. We have to run. Leave the country." But Ava shook her head. "It doesn't matter where we go. If the house is alive, it's inside me now." She reached for the only thing she feared more than going back, doing nothing. The two of them returned to the forest where Holistay had stood. No crater, no ashes, just trees, normal trees, until Mark noticed something buried under the leaves. A door, black, metal, circular, half buried in earth and marked with the same spiral symbol. No house above it, just the cellar door leading downward. Mark whispered, "It's moved. It's waiting." They looked at each other and descended. The stairs led to a small stone corridor lined with mirrors. But the mirrors didn't reflect Ava and Mark. They reflected memories. Ava crying beside Emily's grave. Mark standing over a body in a hospital, covered in blood. One mirror showed them both, laughing in the Holistay kitchen, only for their faces to suddenly distort, bleeding from their eyes as black hands pulled them into the floor. Ava clutched her stomach. "It's feeding on memory. It's making this real again." They reached the end. A black door. The number 333 etched into it. She opened it. Inside, Holistay was whole. The furniture, the paintings, the scent of citrus and cedarwood. It hadn't rebuilt itself. It had regrown. Like a tumor. And worse, someone was already there. Clara, alive, standing at the bottom of the stairs, smiling. "You came back. Good. We missed you." Ava stepped forward. "You died. I saw you die." Clara's face cracked, just slightly, not from emotion, from something underneath. "Death is just the hallway here," she said. "I walked back through." She raised a hand. "Welcome home, Ava. It's time for the final offering." Mark lunged forward, but the house fought back, its floor opening like a mouth. Swallowing him whole, Ava screamed. Clara began to chant. The walls pulsed. Pictures melted into flesh. The table legs twitched like spiders. Ava fell to her knees, bleeding from the spiral on her hand. But this time, she didn't beg. She didn't run. She remembered. Every painful memory, every betrayal, every fear. And from that pain, power. She stood, eyes glowing. Clara backed away. "You're not supposed to fight," Clara hissed. Ava stepped closer. "I'm not your offering. I'm your infection." And with both hands, she gripped the spiral on her palm and tore it open. The room shattered like glass. Ava fell into a deeper void, the real core of Holistay. She stood in a pitch-black, massive cavern. The true heart floated in the air, a pulsing mass of eyes, mouths, and limbs, all whispering, "Stay, stay." Below it, Mark, suspended, alive barely. And above, it grew, feeding. Ava raised her hand, the spiral now glowing gold. The house screamed. It remembered what she was, not just a victim, a survivor. She screamed back and stabbed her hand into the heart. Reality broke. Every guest, every lost soul, every echo of memory burst from the walls. A maelstrom of pain and time and hunger. Ava grabbed Mark's hand, pulled him out. The walls fell. The ground burned. The true Holistay collapsed, not just into rubble, but into non-existence. Ava now lives in a quiet town far away, Mark beside her. She runs a support center for trauma victims. But sometimes, when the lights flicker at 3:33 a.m., she sits up in bed and listens. Nothing. But the spiral is still faintly visible on her palm. Not burning. Just watching. A luxury rental home in Japan. A couple checks in. The door closes. The host smiles. A symbol on her neck glows faintly. The spiral never dies. It simply moves. It's been 13 months since the house fell. I should feel peace, but instead, I feel eyes in every reflection. I see spirals in puddles, in coffee foam, in the grain of the wood floor. Mark thinks I'm paranoid, but I think it's growing again, somewhere else. It arrived with no return address. Inside was a photograph, a house, colonial style, white windows, a rustic sign above the door. Solstice Haven Retreat, somewhere in the Swiss Alps, and on the back, written in perfect handwriting, "You didn't kill it. You set it free. Come finish what you started. See." Beneath that, a spiral symbol, half faded, drawn in blood. Mark stood behind her, silent. "We need to go," Ava said. He didn't argue. They arrived in Switzerland under assumed names. No record of Ava or Mark should lead there. Solstice Haven was stunning, pristine, snow-covered. But beneath the beauty, Ava felt hunger. The receptionist, another woman with yellow-flecked eyes, smiled too widely. Ava noted her name tag, Lisette. "We're so happy to have you," she said. "You're just in time for the ritual snowfall dinner." Mark leaned in. "Do you think she's one of them?" Ava nodded. "She's not staff. She's a disciple." That night, Ava followed Lisette through a side hallway while Mark distracted staff in the dining room. She found a basement chapel carved into the mountain. Stone walls, a shrine of bones, and a congregation of 12 people in white robes, all with spiral scars carved into their palms and foreheads. They chanted, "It lives in memory. It feeds on loss. Through us, it lives. Through the house, it reigns." Lisette stepped forward. "The Holistay was only a seed. We are the roots." Ava stepped backward, then stepped on something. It cracked. Heads turned. She ran. She didn't get far. A blow to the head. Darkness. When Ava woke up, she was tied to a chair, underground. The spiral brand on her palm pulsed painfully. Lisette stood over her, gently combing her hair like a mother. "You think you survived, but you were chosen." She whispered into Ava's ear. "There are 13 seed houses. Holistay was only the first, and your destruction of it made you sacred. A living scar on the network." "You're insane," Ava spat. "No, we're believers, and the next house opens tonight." Back upstairs, Mark frantically searched for Ava. He found an old registry of the retreat's founders. A photo from 1979 showed Clara, smiling and young. She had not aged a day since Holistay. He turned the photo over. Written in French, "1 of 13, Solstice Haven. Next, Via Spirale, Florence, Italy." He whispered. Ava was right. He turned to leave, and came face to face with Clara, alive, unchanged, smiling. Back in the basement, Ava fought against her restraints. Oh, then she remembered what Clara had once told her. The spiral is a door. She focused on the mark in her palm, pictured Holistay, pictured the heart. The pain flared, then burst into light. The ropes unraveled. Her eyes glowed gold. Lisette stumbled back, hissing, "You're not one of us." "No," Ava said. "I'm what comes after." She ran, blasting open the door with a force not entirely hers. Ava found the cult ceremony in full swing. Candles, chants, the air full of incense and static. Clara and Lisette stood before a stone altar, preparing to open a new gateway. Mark was on his knees, bound and bleeding. Ava threw a chair into the circle, breaking it. The spiral flames flickered. "Enough!" Ava screamed. The walls cracked. The mountain groaned. The cultists screamed as black veins erupted from the floor, grabbing at them, not summoned by Ava, but by the house itself, and now it wanted them all. The cultists begged for mercy. Lisette cried. Clara only laughed. Ava grabbed Mark and ran through the crumbling chapel, leaping over collapsed pews and bleeding stone. They emerged into the snow. The retreat behind them sank into the earth, pulled by unseen roots. As the screams faded, the wind returned. Mark turned to Ava. "You said 13. She nodded. 12 more. He wiped blood from his nose. "We're not running anymore." She looked down at her palm, where the spiral had cracked. "We're hunting." In a grand villa overlooking the hills, a woman painted spirals onto the wall. She turned as a phone rang. "Yes," she said. "Solstice Haven is gone, but the others are waking up." She hung up. From the wall, the paint bled, and a shadow crawled across the floor. Ava and Mark arrived in Florence under new identities. Museum donors from the U.S. interested in historic estate preservation. Their destination? A centuries-old villa outside the city, Villa Spirale, whose architectural blueprints bore an unmistakable symbol, the spiral. It was said to have been built in 1604 by an enigmatic architect named Giovanni Spirato. Locals never lived near it, tourists rarely found it, and those who did never left reviews. They were met at the villa gates by a man with a gaunt face and hands too pale. "I'm Arturo," he said, "caretaker of the villa." Mark noticed a slight bulge beneath Arturo's right sleeve, like his arm was stitched together. The man smiled too politely. "The house is prepared for you," Arturo said. "You've come a long way." "How did you—" "The house always—" That night, they were escorted to a massive marble guest room with Renaissance paintings, except, upon closer inspection, every figure in every painting had no face, only spirals. At 3:33 a.m., the clock in their room began ticking backward. Mark sat upright in bed, gasping. Ava was already awake, watching the ceiling pulse gently, as if the wood were breathing. She whispered, "The villa isn't haunted. It's alive. It remembers." From down the hall, something began to sing. A male voice, in Latin, low, ancient, cracked, a hymn to something older than God. The next morning, Ava demanded to see the architectural records. Arturo led them to the villa's underground archives. Dusty shelves, rotting scrolls, ink that bled under their fingers. There they found it, a sketch. Giovanni Spirito, long white beard, eyes that looked too modern. Mark whispered, "He looks like someone we saw at Holistay." "Holistay was a sprout," Arturo said. "Villa Spirale is the root. You destroyed one fruit, but the tree lives." Ava reached for the dagger hidden under her pillow. Arturo tilted his head. "You think this is the same game? No. Now you're not in the house." He smiled. "You're beneath it." The floor opened. They fell. They landed in a dark, wet corridor beneath the villa. An ancient catacomb, older than Florence itself. Mark limped. Ava bled from her temple. Torches ignited along the walls without touch, and from the end of the tunnel came a figure. Giovanni Spirito. Not a ghost, not a man, something in between. His eyes were endless spirals. His fingers too long. He carried a cane made of spine. "You wear the scar," he said to Ava. She raised her hand. He smiled. "You survived Holistay. You survived Solstice Haven. That makes you—" He knelt. A key. The cultists began a chant. The walls of the catacomb responded, shifting, reshaping. Mark tried to rush forward, but the air between him and Ava turned solid, like glass. Giovanni continued. "The houses were never separate. They're pieces of a god that was shattered. You've carried part of it since the fire. You'll be the one to unify the houses." Ava screamed. "No!" She slammed her spiral-marked hand against the ground. Everything shattered. Suddenly, Ava was alone, inside a circular room of mirrors. Each one showed a version of her. One smiled and waved. Another wept. Another stabbed Mark. Another was Clara. She touched the mirror. The reflection whispered, "There is no you anymore, only echoes." Ava clenched her fists. "I am not your echo." She turned to the center of the room, where Giovanni waited. He raised his cane. It transformed into a massive spiral gate of bone and memory. "I offer you your mother's voice, your father's forgiveness, the child you never had. Accept the spiral." Ava screamed and reached into her chest, pulling free a blinding golden version of the spiral, the broken one. She slammed it into the center of Giovanni's gate. It shattered. Screams. Collapse. Ava pulled Mark out of the rubble as the villa trembled above them. Walls folded inward. The cult screamed. Arturo begged for forgiveness, and Giovanni dissolved into ash. They escaped through a side corridor as Villa Spirale imploded, leaving only dust and silence. They didn't speak until they reached Florence proper. Ava turned to Mark. "Two down." He nodded. She said quietly, 11 more. A solar-powered glamping resort stands alone in the dunes. Guests sip wine beneath stars. A man plays a flute near the fire pit, and deep beneath the sand, a new spiral pulses. Waiting, Ava and Mark arrived at an exclusive desert retreat deep in the Sahara. On the surface, it was all minimalist luxury, glass domes, meditation tents, and silence. But beneath the sand, something old stirred. At sunset, a guest vanished without a sound. That night, the stars formed spirals. Ava clutched her palm. "This is the third," she whispered. "It's waking up faster." In her dreams, she wandered endless dunes, each marked with symbols, each one whispering her name. Mark woke her. "There's something under the camp," he said. "Buried deep." They dug. They found a door made of bone and gold, sealed with spiral carvings. It opened on its own. From within came a voice they both knew. Clara. "Welcome back, travelers. The spiral never ends." Ava and Mark descended into the golden spiral door beneath the desert. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, until even their footsteps made no sound. The walls pulsed like veins. Then they saw it, a massive underground chamber shaped like an hourglass, filled with shifting sand that flowed upward. Suspended in the center was a body, Clara, eyes open, smiling, breathing without breath. She spoke without moving her lips. "This is the spiral of time. You can die here." Again and again, Mark turned pale. "We need to go." But the way back was gone. Behind them, only sand. And ahead, a door with 13 locks. Ava stepped closer to the ancient door embedded in the sand-carved wall. Each of the 13 locks bore a different symbol: an eye, a flame, a screaming face, and a spiral shaped like a serpent eating its own tail. Behind her, Clara's body vanished into dust. Mark whispered, "This isn't a house anymore. It's a tomb." Suddenly, one of the locks clicked open. Then another. Ava hadn't touched them. Mark asked, "What's unlocking it?" Ava swallowed. "Us." The chamber began to rotate slowly, as if time itself was turning. A voice echoed from behind the door, deep, hungry, and familiar. "You've opened 3 homes. Only 10 remain. Come closer, Ava. We've been waiting since your first scream." The chamber grew colder as the 3rd lock clicked open. Ava stared at the massive door, each of its 13 locks now glowing faintly. Sand sifted from the ceiling in slow spirals, falling with unnatural precision. Mark knelt beside one of the symbols, the eye, and brushed away dust. "It's watching," he said. Ava didn't respond. Her hand throbbed, the spiral mark on her palm flaring with heat. The 4th lock clicked open. Ava turned to Mark, her voice low. "We didn't come here to open this thing. We came to destroy it." "Maybe it's the same thing," he said. A faint wind blew through the catacombs, though they were far below the surface of the desert. It smelled like copper, like blood, and with it came whispers. "Closer, the house remembers." Ava spun around. "That voice, it's not Clara anymore." Mark nodded grimly. "It's older than her, older than this place." Suddenly, the 5th and 6th locks burst open at once, the metal shrieking like it was alive. The symbols flickered, then started to rearrange themselves. The screaming face twisted into a spiral. The flame symbol pulsed red. The door responded to their presence, their thoughts, their pain. They turned to leave, but the staircase they came down had vanished, replaced by a flat wall of sandstone that bled slowly from its seams. Ava stepped back, staring at the sealed path. "We're in it now," she said. "The spiral doesn't let go once it wraps around you." Below the door, a new sound echoed up from beneath the chamber, a heartbeat. But it wasn't just one, it was many, layered and massive, like the pulse of a buried leviathan. Mark leaned in. "There's something alive below." Ava frowned. Or something pretending to be. Just then, a seventh lock cracked open, and this time, a gush of cold air poured through, like a sigh from the void. Inside the opening, they saw something terrifying. A glimpse. A room made of mirrors, where every version of them screamed silently. Mark stepped closer. One reflection showed him standing alone, bleeding. Another showed Ava behind him, her eyes solid black. "They're possibilities," Ava said. "Versions of us if we fail. Or if they already had."